Welcome back to L Formula, and on today's F1 news, Sergio Perez is spilling the tea on his previous employer Red Bull. Is Sebastian Vettel making a return back to F1? Can you guess the one request that Lewis Hamilton made for the F1 movie? All that and more. As always guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So first up, the breaking news for today is that the 2026 preseason dates have officially been announced, and this is by Racing News 365. It's going to start one whole month earlier than previous testings. They start in Barcelona on the 26th of Jan and finish in Bahrain on the 20th of February. This means that there is only a 2-month gap between the end of this season and the beginning of the next season. So that's good for fans as the season starts earlier, and it's bad for teams and drivers as they only have a shorter period of 2 months to rest and recover. Now that we know these dates, it's also important for Ferrari to make a decision on Fred Vasseur. If they have to get rid of Fred, they should do it soon because they only have 7 months or so before testing begins. So if they were to bring a new person in, for them to have the team and the org structure that they prefer, it will take some period of time for that to settle in. And also what kind of direction they want to go for the 2026 season needs to be defined now. Otherwise, they will be in this repeated cycle of starting on the back foot and making changes through the season. And it's just the same thing, rinse and repeat. The main news that is trending all over Twitter is Perez talking about Red Bull and how they didn't protect him. So this is what he had to say. In the end, that's how sport is. Decisions were made because there was too much pressure that they themselves ended up creating. I had signed a contract in Monaco, but from the next race onwards, everyone was talking about my future even though I already signed a contract. It would have been easier for the team to protect me and say, you know what? We have a driver signed for the next 2 years, but that wasn't the case. From then on, no one talked about anything other than Red Bull race after race. In the end, there was a lot of pressure from my side of the garage. It was putting a lot of pressure on the engineers, on everyone involved, and in the end, that ended up costing us a lot. I know deep down they are very sorry. I know that from a very good source. People might think I'm happy about it, but no, we had a great team, and in the end, it fell apart little by little. I think it's absolutely fascinating, the timing of this article, this interview, because we all know Perez is one of the contenders for the Cadillac seat. And my hunch is that Cadillac management may not be very impressed with Perez's last stint in Red Bull. So this is his way of airing out his side of the story such that it doesn't make him look as bad as it's made out to. But having said that, the second seat at Red Bull has been plagued with disasters from Gasly, Albon, Perez, Liam Lawson, and now Yuki Tsunoda. The car fundamentally has been made in a way that maybe Max prefers it, or Max is the only driver who can extract the performance from it, but it has not done any good for any of these other drivers. And let's be honest, Perez wasn't a bad driver. He had some amazing performances in midfield teams where he was able to come onto the podium and also win races. And he did start pretty well in Red Bull, but it only got worse over time as the car became undrivable in his opinion. Perez has also mentioned that Red Bull regrets parting ways with him, and that might be because even with new candidates coming in like Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda to the seat, and they have not performed that well, but at least with Perez they were getting a huge amount of money from sponsorship deals and also the merch sales that came from America and Latin America. I think those things probably net made Red Bull worse off by getting rid of Perez and putting Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda in that seat. So as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this has got something to do with the Cadillac seat, and he needed to get his message out there such that everyone is aware of what had actually happened behind the scenes. And speaking of the second seat, you can see Nico Hülkenberg in Haas and also the Kick Sauber car has scored 20 points, the same amount of points that the Red Bull drivers had achieved in what was superior machinery. And we can't make that statement about Yuki. Yuki has been an exceptional driver in the Racing Bulls AlphaTauri seat. So I genuinely think it's not a driver issue. It's definitely a car issue. And I don't think Perez is as bad as, you know, the media made him out to be in the last sort of couple of seasons he had with Red Bull. Keeping on the topic of Red Bull, Vettel is looking for a return in Formula One, but it's not as a driver, but potentially in some form of a management role. In this case, it looks like he's probably going to be a successor to Helmut Marko, who runs the junior driver program, who trains and nurtures, well, not really nurtures, but generally is the one who's making the decisions on the drivers, guiding them, and also giving them an earful when they mess up. So this article from Autosport says, 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel says he's in early talks with Helmut Marko over succeeding the Austrian as an advisor to the Red Bull Formula One team in the future. So this is what Vettel had to say when he was speaking to this Austrian broadcaster. We're also in contact about this, though maybe it's not so intensely or in depth yet, but it is possible. What form that might take will have to be seen. He's already said a few times he'd stop, but he's still there, and I wish him all the best so he stays around for a very long time. But of course, eventually time catches up with everyone, and I believe he knows that too. He's a brutally realistic guy and is very good at sizing up situations. I think he'll recognize when the time is right. I'm not really sure where I stand with Vettel joining as an advisor, or at least doing the same role that Helmut had. Helmut's role was an awful role. He needs to find the talent, he needs to put them into the car, and he also needs to make an assessment of when to get rid of them. Is Vettel cut out for that? I think in his early days, he was ruthless, especially when he won his championship. As time went on, he became a bit soft. You can see how maybe having children has made him the person who he is today. He's a great human being, but I would imagine that role needs to be very cutthroat because you're dealing with very young people and you have to deal with their emotions. Think of Isaac Hadjar crying in the first race when he binned it into the corner at Melbourne. What do you do in those instances? Are you going to be like Helmut and tell him to get on with racing and stop crying, or are you going to put your arm around him? What is needed for the business opposed to the individual people? If Vettel is too soft, then will you get the kind of best talent and get the best out of your drivers, or will they become complacent because they know that they can get away with it? I think it'll be interesting to see. I would think it would be better if Helmut takes him under his wing and shows him how he does it, even though he already knows it. He's been in contact with Helmut. Helmut brought him into the sport, but maybe watching it live and as an apprentice would probably be best for Vettel. I don't think he should just come straight in. That's just my opinion. And then speaking of junior drivers, this is what Helmut Marko had to say about Lindblad. He's been in the news off lately because of all the tests he's been doing and just the rumors. Lindblad is only 17 and he's been very fast in all racing classes. He is also mentally very strong and he is incredibly eager to learn. Lindblad has all the characteristics to become a really great driver. Helmut Marko does not give out compliments to anyone. So the fact that he is saying this about this driver means he is special. He is potentially a Max Verstappen or a Sebastian Vettel. Helmut Marko will never give flowers or praise to anyone, especially the juniors, because he wants to make sure that they have a level head. So this guy must be the real deal if it's coming from him. And on the topic of that, it seems that Lindblad's going to be making his F1 debut in FP1 at the British Grand Prix. I think this is going to put a lot of pressure on the other three drivers in the Red Bull stable. But I personally feel like it's going to be either Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda who will potentially be replaced. One of them is going to lose their seats and he is probably going to take their place. And it's really great to see how young drivers are being put in the top teams. Obviously, Kimi Antonelli is the one that comes to mind. This is just a quote from Toto. There were lots of voices that said, how can you put an 18-year-old in a car, especially in a Mercedes? That has been our philosophy. We wouldn't give anyone a seat if we didn't think they could be a champion of the future. I'm so glad that teams are recognizing that these young talents can actually develop very quickly. They're already very mature. Maybe it's because of social media. Maybe it's just exposure to cameras, interviews, and things like that. The Gen Zs are much better prepared to come to Formula One than the previous class did. So I have no doubts that Lindblad would be able to come in next season, and if he starts in Racing Bulls and a seat then becomes available on Red Bull, he should definitely be promoted as quickly as possible. Finally, on this George Russell contract saga, Montoya has now joined the conversation and he has added something about George Russell. So let's just see what he had to say. George has been in a bad mood since he entered F1 because he joined Mercedes that went from winning everything to not winning. So it's a bit sad and difficult for him, but he has matured a lot and he has done a good job. Now the problem is that at this point, George still doesn't have a contract. Personally, after this win, I would assume that they would have signed him by now and would have secured it for him, because he and Max are probably the two most desirable people without a contract. Max, theoretically, he has a contract, but George is the most desirable person in the field who at this moment I would say doesn't have a contract. So if you were to look at it that way, Red Bull could come with a lot of money to secure themselves in case Max leaves. He wants to go to work with Red Bull and with Max. I would say 100% no. Personally, regarding Toto right now, I do not think you need Max with Mercedes as it is right now. And that's true. I don't think Mercedes technically needs Max. Maybe they want to have Max in their stable to win a championship, so then they can say, we had Michael Schumacher, we had Lewis Hamilton, obviously Nico Rosberg won a championship, and now you have Max Verstappen. But the stable that they have, George Russell and a future prospect of Kimi Antonelli, you don't need a Max Verstappen. And if your car's going to be rumored to be the best next year because of the engine, what is the point of pursuing Max if you know you potentially could win a championship? It's just a question if Toto is looking for some form of legacy of having certain drivers in his resume as team principal. Finally, we'll just finish off. Lewis Hamilton had one request in this Formula One movie to make it authentic. I wonder what you think it is. Leave a guess in the comments right now. It was to have David Croft and Martin Brundle in the F1 film who were doing the commentary as the race was going on in the film. And this is what Crofty had to say. If it wasn't for Lewis, I wouldn't be in the film. He sat down with the producer and the director and said, look, if you want to make it authentic in terms of commentary, do not get an act. Get Crofty and Martin to do it because they are the voice. And so I'm really glad to say that the producers agreed with Lewis on that, and I thanked him for it a couple of years ago. He said, well, you don't have to thank me. And I said, no, you said a really nice thing and I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't really know if anyone else could have done a better job than those two. They're quite iconic on Sky Sports, especially when it's off the cuff. And also their voices tend to be associated with Formula One. So I think this was a great suggestion by Lewis. I haven't watched the film yet, so if you have, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. With that, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for listening.